Welcome everyone to another episode of Unplugged Talks. This is our 9th episode, and we've got some very, very special people with us today. Before I introduce you to them, I just want to tell you a little bit about who we are, what we are doing. Unplugged Talks is a collection and a series of conversations with creative minds from all across the world, which was initiated by Virendra Baklu of Matra Architects and myself together. We co-curate these series. And we've had some very interesting talks with people. And the idea here is not to necessarily talk about their professional work, but to get to know who they are, to peel back a few layers, to find out what makes them tick, what influences them, what their journey has been like, and what makes them do what they do. And today we could not be happier, and I could not be more excited to welcome two very close friends. We have Sumir and Jiten of Thukral Tagra fame, the fabulous artist duo. We're very, very excited to have the two of them with us today. We've had some very interesting conversations already, but we're excited to share some of that with you. And we're here to know what they're doing, why they're doing it, and what makes them do what they do and be so fabulous. So a big warm welcome on behalf of Matra, myself, Viren, and everybody here on Facebook, Instagram, Zoom, to TNT as we call them.
Thank you so much, Mrinalini, and thank you, Virendra, for inviting us. And it's interesting because both of you, we have a relationship with both of you in a very different way, and it is interesting to kind of see all of them together. So we're very happy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Glad
much
to see you. Yep.
for taking out your Saturday afternoon for this. We're going to jump right into our chat. But before that, I'm going to give a quick introduction to those people who don't know too much about you. And I'm sure there'll be very few of those. But Jiten Tukral and Thukral Tagra work collaboratively with a wide range of media, including painting, sculpture, installations, interactive games, video, performance, and design. Popularly known as Tukral and Tagra, they work on new formats of public engagement and attempt to expand the scope of what art can do, further emphasizing what the practice can do in a virtual context through their archives and publications. They break out of the mediated disciplinary world, create multimodal sensory and storytelling in immersive environments. Their earlier work dealt with tropes of migration, mythological narratives, symbols of Indian identity, and motifs of a globally manifested consumer culture that enlivens a largely pedantic and static area of cultural material. From a pop visual character to a predominantly abstract visual approach and compositional philosophy, Tukral and Tagra constantly shift in terms of their grammar and vocabulary. They have offered socio-political commentary that is implicit in their aesthetic for the past 18 years. And I think that is what actually sets them aside from a lot of art that is happening today. But recently, they have sought to identify the practice as a platform for pedagogy through their collaborative effort, Pollinator, an interdisciplinary lab which cultivates an inclusive learning ecosystem that aspires to achieve knowledge sharing through cross-pollination. And we will be talking about that as well soon. But before we get into your work and before we get into what is keeping you busy, I wanted to know that you guys have had an extraordinary journey on your own and together, sprinkled with excitement, adventure, lots of travel. You guys have worked, you've been in residencies across the world. You're constantly on the move. You're exhibiting in different parts and in different countries. And then suddenly this lockdown happens and this virus hits all of us. And you guys are now stuck in Gurgaon, right? And in your studios. So where are you at right now in terms of just your physical space? What kind of mind space are you in? What is occupying you? And at this point, I also have to tell the audience, I've been to your studio and it is not a bad place to be in. But tell us more about where you are.
Well, thank you so much for kind words. One thing which you missed is full of failures as well. We fail and learn, and then we get up and then we try to do it better. I think one of the reasons of one of the feelings of being in this kind of a space was that because we were as a team, we also did not felt extremely isolated. We kept meeting for 14 days. It was tough for us to kind of open up, but It's just, I think mostly it was more scared since we live in a confined environment, and the ecosystem does allow us to kind of operate seemingly and much more than because it does not have any travel. So we live in a condominium where one of the studios is one of the apartments. Uh, I mean, in a sense that we have two studios. One is the largest studio where we produce work. This is where we actually are stuck on the sixth floor.
This is more like a thinking space for us, where we come and just.
But you've still been able to access the other studio during this time, right?
But that's only 7 minutes away from our place.
Yeah.
It's only, if you go walking, you can go. But
So do you want to show us a little bit about you want to show us your space? Can we get a quick glimpse?
So what we normally have actually done is now our recent walk to the studio, we have it with us so that it actually opens up an interesting doorway to see what we try to do and we fail. So can we share the screen now?
Yeah, sure.
So this is where the studio looks like, and you can imagine it is a typical house near us, and then we are sandwiched between houses and just a little walk inside. And the studio space was built up in 2000 from 2013 to 2015. I think 2012 to 2015 took 3 years. And we ran out of money, so we had to stop building it, and then again we started. So you know how it works. And then the pieces, whatever it was left over, so we converted these things into into sculpture pieces. The little pieces of the furniture pieces, which actually occupy most of the space, is from an exhibition. So we try to recycle them. There was pieces by Anup Makundu, and then we became friends to kind of reuse these objects into our permanent space. And the leftover were then used to kind of develop more interesting new works. And the works are here is basically all kinds of works which you will actually see, all kind of packed stuff, but also all kinds of mediums. This is a porcelain piece with some pieces which are left to kind of go to an exhibition. And
behind that piece you see is a block print. It's a large block print. It's a gold foil on a paper.
So as we will detail out these things, we go ahead and then probably we can pick it up to certain techniques if we want to. But by and large, this is like kind of a prima facie of how the space looks like and how it is.
Can you please explain why Gandhiji is looking through a porthole which faces a wall?
Well, this was made in 2016, and as a piece where we were using the table tennis table as our ongoing investigation about the rules and systems of play. And so two things came together from a different vantage point, but they now sit together, and they're actually, Gandhiji is looking towards a void and facing towards not facing towards the audiences actually, and looking away. And somehow when they actually look into and they sit with each other, there's a new economics which actually happen, a new understanding that wall and the sculpture piece talking to each other, and which was not in the beginning. But somehow it also opens up many new dialogues of how we see the political changes today, and kind of somebody's not really interested in it. But by and large, yeah, the meanings are interesting to kind of open up new ways to see it. I think the works becomes a doorway to understand new methodologies, new mediums, and new meanings in different time zones. So as you see a painting seen from a work which was never meant to be together, but somehow they kind of work in tandem with each other. So these are walking towards the stairways and getting into where we actually operate. The one of the spaces which we operate is from here, which is our kind of a lab of kind of like failing and kind of throwing color. So it's like a kids in the candy shop to begin with, but also goes into extreme meditations, and then somehow our shadows will never leave the work. So we are aware that the time spent on the work will actually stay for really, really long. And we're trying to kind of understand how we can move away from, delete ourselves from the frame at this moment. So different time zones actually allow you to do different sort of investigations, and this is the scale of the work. I mean, we normally bring ourselves to kind of open up the scale sometimes. It's on a metal, and the symbols have been actually been there since quite many years now about an inflated marble balloon, which is basically an arrested image of a dream, and how you actually will not be able to fulfill your desires and passing on to your children. And so, as the idea of flying as a metaphor to move ahead in life, but also constantly dreamt subject matter of a human. So we've been using these methodologies to kind of open up our own personal insecurities. So in a way that these things becomes investigative, introspective, also looking into by and large larger understanding of how we are actually grown up.
It's really interesting to see a studio space of an artist as opposed to their work in an exhibition, right? Because in an exhibition, the collection is isolated. It's very intended. Whereas in a studio space, what's fascinating is to see so many different pieces from various points of your practice that start to get layered over. And this is something that I will come to later, but then there, you start to kind of pull on a lot of common threads or a lot of differences for that matter as well.
Yeah, I mean, in a way that we're living in a world of singularity and plurality at the same time. That somebody wants it to compress it, somebody we want to expand it, or however it is. And it is interesting this kind of this tension between both the ideologies haven't always been there, but how predominantly it affects your practice is something which is really interesting to kind of see that the works have gone more political, more engaging in terms of how we want to see the body of work moving. Also, the other day it was very interesting that discussion about you need to choose three things about impact, career, and money. So, and you cannot probably choose all three. So it is interesting to kind of see these little works of ours which have been constantly manifested in some kind of moment in time. They kind of like hover back and kind of like come and pick it up, one of the subject matter and one of the words. So looking into, I mean, this is something which we've been doing last week. So this is from there. Uh, we've been using certain symbols, as you see, a table tennis table, which has been a co-occurring work investigation, and we were probably talking about the lulaments, which we did when with Mrinalini and at Stir, and it is interesting to kind of open up those layers once we move ahead from here. Uh, but by and large, the timekeeping and also like we're interested inquiries have actually started coming in, and we've been also thinking from a perspective that the works of ours, I mean, artistic actually practice becomes a self-portrait in third person, in a way that whatever we've been actually creating has been actually our own investigation, but it is done in a different vocabulary. And how does that kind of works? Because it becomes a mirror to our understanding, and how do you actually open up, create this idea of portraiture or create this idea of kind of self-investigation within this kind of a frame of work?
So have you guys been, like, you know, a lot of people, I've been having a lot of conversations for the last 5 months that we've all been sitting at home, and with various creative people, designers, architects, artists, a lot of them are complaining about how they just can't think, right? They're not in that space where they can think, or they're kind of hitting these walls. Whereas a lot of other people have been saying that they're hyper productive, they're being able to, you know, tap into their creativity. So which are two extreme ends of the spectrum. Where do you find yourselves on that scale?
Hyperactive.
Really?
I mean,
So you guys have been like really going for it and getting stuff done, huh?
see, honestly, like it is definitely, I mean, there are two answers. Actually, we will say both, because
Hmm.
there are extreme low tide, high tide zones that you are actually looking into things which are not going to be possible at all, since you are actually restrained into one area. And at the same time, you have studio to fully explore whatever you always wanted to do. We could actually do, and somehow the work at one point of time, definitely our 6 to 7 exhibitions got cancelled, all the travel
Hmm.
plans, like everybody, there's nothing new.
Yeah.
Of course, the business, we don't know when the next payment is going to come and from where it is going to come. And these are very, very vital issues to kind of sort of sustain a big ship.
Hmm.
And how do you kind of fuel in when you are set, when the anchor is so deep that you can't actually move here and there, you know. Uh, so at the same time, we also thought that making a new boat with us will be really interesting, so that we can actually roam around and come back. The boat is called Pollinator,
Hmm.
and we could actually do a lot to do with Pollinator, which we couldn't think of doing in a practice which we both operate. So meaning that the larger ship needs some kind of a fueling that is also meeting with a lot of exhibition deadlines. But when we actually talk about Pollinator, it is an open format and kind of an open resource as much as we can.
Hmm.
And there's this word which we are actually very dear to, we're trying to get it as much as possible, which is the democratic understanding of an institution. And how does it kind of work is when the sources and everything is democratic. It is a very tough word to be on. It's a tightrope. So what we did was we tried to kind of open up a new system of learning in a way that it's an ecosystem, in a way that
Hmm.
there is practice as a pedagogy, and then how do we actually use that platform to build up more support system, care, and also an empathy understanding of anything which when we share the knowledge. Uh, and those are the things which we always wanted to do, but lockdown actually allowed us to do those things. But
Hmm.
I would not be using the word fantastic time at all, because it is probably the most downtime ever we ever had in our history, in our recent history. But also looking into this as trying to reinvent and trying to reboot the entire way of looking and of the studio. So yeah.
So I know that you've been really busy with Pollinator and you've initiated a new residency, if I'm not wrong.
Yes.
So, and you guys were just going through all the submissions. So tell us a little bit about it.
So the Pollinator is conceived 3.5 years back with one of our friends called Prayas Abhinav,
Hmm.
and he's a game designer, and we jammed together, and that's how it developed. We did the first iteration in an art fair in 2018, and then we did another project called Nafrat, which was to do with the idea of exploring of hate and care, which is Nafrat Parwa, with another partner, which is Pond in New Delhi. And then we did another tiny project called Solitude, which is basically a birth of this kind of idea of boredom and kind of more of meditative understanding of being isolated. And once we actually hit both the points, we wanted to kind of open up a new uh, doorway to a new reach out to people. And we actually contacted one of our curators, who is the guest pollinator, we call Shaleen Wadwana. She is an arts educator, and
Hmm.
we jammed up together with the new idea of virtual nursery, and trying to kind of host in people virtually that we will never meet anybody. Even the curator is not meeting us, and so we are all doing digitally. So it is one of its kind exercise where we are thinking about conceiving the works digitally, conceiving the works for a digital platform, also hosting it by mentoring a mind. So out of a very strict response and a strict uh, prompt, which was basically a non-traditional prompt of which does not even ask your biodata, experience, age, gender, space where you're living in, what have you done before this, and we did not ask any, but we asked for the how did you use the creative block? What was your response to this creative block? And response to the idea of Fisher, which is Shireen came up with a curatorial prompt, which was really apt, looking into our understanding and our track record of what we were trying to build. And this is a curriculum-based exercise which will be talking about bias and fear by and large, and kind of investigating and educating ourselves, to be honest, to begin with.
It's fascinating because as artists, and all the work of yours that I have seen, even if they were canvases, they seem very spatial. They seem to occupy space, and your work is like that, right? And you guys as people are like that, where you want to occupy space. And I think my closest interaction with you was during Lullaments when we were putting it together at Stir. But all your work seems to have this scale, has a body, and now you're working virtually, which is completely the opposite at the other end of the range over here. So is that challenging? Do you miss that kind of physical environment that you are used to interacting with?
No, I think definitely. I mean, in a way that we both, it's not that, I mean, yes, we have been very trying to be as digital in terms of responding to the particular time, also recalibrating ourselves and our ways of thinking. But in no way it can be actually seen as a replacement of the physical space.
Mm.
Meaning that it cannot be a replacement to any of the uh, walking into the wild experience. It cannot, a video cannot replace that at all. But what it can actually do has brought in the accessibility and time manage. It has actually allowed us to kind of connect. Like right now, we're actually working with different faculties all across the world to deliver lectures and to kind of make new modules with them. At the same time, the pollinator, and at the same time, we are mentoring a couple of more students from Khoj in a way that it's more of like constant engagement with lots of people, which was not there in 5 months back. I mean, in a way that if we really need to understand what is the ways and negative and the positives of it.
So, I mean, coming back to the spatial thing, like, it's actually quite fascinating to be talking to artists, because till now, in the last 8 interviews that we've done, it's been predominantly architects and designers. And, but like I said earlier, there is a certain, a very distinct interaction with spatial qualities in your work. But what is also interesting is that you talk a lot about the urban scale. You talk a lot about objects in a lot of your artworks, whether it's a TT table or whether it's a mat that people have to wrestle on. A lot of it is very immersive, very interactive, but spatial in that sense, right? What is this, as artists, what is this kind of fascination that you have with the built environment? Or shed some light on you working with space.
So interestingly, in a way that, I mean, when we actually see a building or any kind of an object matter, I mean, a building can be seen as a sculpture piece. So let's expand the idea of it. Through it is a purely poetic sort of a thing. Maybe Virendra will actually see that what the hell are they trying to talk about? Give us a chance. I mean, we will try to kind of expand this understanding how we actually try to think in one way. It is quite.
I think it'll be fascinating to know how artists or non-architects are looking at architecture, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have architecture friends, and how we actually see architecture is a very interesting way to look into. I mean, Jiten actually studied in Chandigarh, so in Chandigarh College of Art, and I studied in NID. So both of them has a very interesting principle of structure and kind of grid understanding and open form, in the sense that people can actually fill in and make, it's just done. Anyways, it's a.
No, but I think it's a very relevant example that you're talking about, because both spaces, Chandigarh, NID, I mean, both of them are looked up at as architectural marvels, right, in their own way, as spatial marvels. So it's interesting to having been studied in that environment. So I'm sure you're influenced in some way or the other.
Yeah, so the first walk to in Ahmedabad was Mill Owners Building. I did not know much about, because you don't really, when you don't know that this is what will be really interesting for you, like when you walk in and when you walk in again. So it's anyways, it's like a little time wrap. But one of the things which we wanted to kind of see that, I mean, if we tried doing it in one of the buildings in Aerocity, was that the house has been perceived as a book, okay? Like the pages made of walls and the characters are breathing. Windows are illustrations. The doors are viewfinders that bridge between the different chapters. The day is a paragraph, and sometimes it's just a realization. The protagonist is the reader and the writer as well. The performance piece that functions across a day, like a story of Babel, with expressions of emotion, anxiety, and comfort. Meaning that now, how do you expand architecture as a book form? So, okay, so one of the things which we wanted to admit was that we love making books. So, book actually allowed us to kind of go into many different ways of using different objects as an analogy. You know, like eating a particular kind of food can be a very interesting book opening. So you can actually open up and it is tasting. So it is kind of like moving into a space for us. Doesn't that make sense?
Of course.
It can have a lot of history with us. So I don't know, like I grew up in Jalandhar in Punjab. So opposite to my house, there was a printing press, that other block printing press, the other traditional printing press. So where then every day and night the press used to work, and you can hear the noise of that chop 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 of the printing press. Then I used to go and learn a block making in the same house, because they were making all different kind of blocks to print. So plus the time when you used to go and sit down and work with the craftsman and make the work with the pressman and make the every letter pick up and make your own layout.
Yeah.
No computer on that time I'm talking about. So I know we come from that old side.
Old side.
Old side.
No, I mean, like,
Yeah.
for me, it was when the computer came in. I mean, we were like young, man. I was learning from my dad, and on the other side, Sumir's dad was also dealing with the same kind of printing press, and they were into printing. And it was a very different experience coming from completely manual then digital version. You know, so it was a completely different stories.
So, I mean, the bookmaking is basically one of the loves, and by this time we have like good amount of books. We're calling it like an archive section where all the kind of making of a work, making of all those installations, which is just an image in the end, can be peeled off, and then we can actually expand the understanding. So, and the book comes in a particular size and scale, and so as that any kind of project which is allowed us to operate, we will first tell the person, whoever we are doing it, that will you actually fund making the book, you know? So it is interesting to kind of use that as a way to move in, as a commitment to do that. I want to make the book for this project. And the books actually look like in this kind of scale. And they're small, and you can actually use them, and they're not that big, so that it is like in a way that it is so heavy that you can't even actually sit down and read. So it is basically, you can actually sit on your sofa, sit in your bed, and then open the book and read. So there is this kind of product placement, as a lot of marketing words I've been actually using, that it's interesting to kind of use these ways or these strategies to kind of open up new discussions. So the book is now, I mean, we have 10 books, and then we are making a new platform to disseminate these books, and people can actually buy them or whatever. And there are certain open books as well.
I think it's really interesting. I've seen some of your books, and they're fascinating. They're really well. I think, like you said, the scale of the book is something that's very intimate. So you can actually get up close and personal with it, as opposed to like a massive coffee table book where you have to, put it down formally on a table and flip through large pages. This is something that allows you to get intimate and allows you to get to know what you're talking about and allows you to interpret it very personally. One of my favorites is the book about the bridges. And I was hoping that you could share something from there, which, if I'm not mistaken, is also one of your early projects that you did with an architect, right?
Yes, it is. It is the first, not really first, but kind of a project which we were very happy to be associated with. This was with Sir David Adjei. This was in 2 years
And
back.
none other than David Adjei for that.
Well, we want to use this chat as a pitch to work with Virendra Vaklu as
well. Let's take it further. Why only Virendra Vaklu? I would say that, let's talk about this first. Show us what you've done with David Ajay, and then I think that will speak for itself. But we've got lots of architects here. And it's important for people to understand the value of collaborations and cross-disciplinary sort of, dialogue. And I think it's great that you've done that. You've worked with Anupama Kundu. You worked with, you had a very integral role to play at the Roseate as well, right? Yeah. And you did this proposal with David Ajay, which was absolutely stunning. So show us a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a tiny exercise about how, so David Ajay approached us to be in his team to work on an illuminated river project. And it was an exercise where 17 bridges were supposed to be lit by as a competition. And we eventually lost the competition, which is fine. But the fun part is that we could actually engage with the team and then operate it for like over the span of 3 months. We could actually develop something really interesting. So we're going to show, it's a 1-minute video of that. And once it is done, then we can actually come back to read a couple of things out of it.
Okay.
Yeah, sharing screen now.
Great.
This bridge is perceived to be the backbone of possibilities and nostalgia. The idea is to see the structure as a book. The Vauxhall Bridge has 4 columns and 8 sculptures that translate into 8 chapters, each column guarding our beliefs and continuing to inspire us. The bridge is not just a bridge. This bridge is the spine of a book, which looks into the past and heads into the future. So the text is a passage, light is the experience of reading, illumination is observed, and the knowledge is emergent. The bridge is responding to 3 variables. The intensity and the area of each color would adjust itself according to the change in any of 3. First, the time. Second, the weather. And third, the number of people crossing the bridge. All 3 combined, giving it an appearance of it breathing.
I think this is also a good time to say that this is where the title of the talk was derived from, the title of this video is "The Bridge is Breathing," and that's where we decided that we're going to name this talk the same thing.
Yeah, for us it was very interesting because, I mean, at the same time, because of the political understanding, everybody is burning the bridges. See? So when we're actually looking at bridges breathing in a way that bridge is seen as a future is seen as an optimism. I think, and that's something which we really wanted to build through our projects, through our works, and I think it is somehow essential, like the part of the day, that you need to have some kind of a no bad news day and then work on the good news day or something, So yeah, so the project actually allowed us to dwell into an architecture space, a structure which is kind of can be a smaller bridge, can be a biggest bridge as well, and bridges are quite fascinating as an object in its own sense. Let's call it like an artwork, and kind of let's call it like a sculpture piece as well. And the walking over the bridge is quite a performative exercise. When you see 2 people actually standing there holding hands, it is quite interesting. So we did a couple of exercises and kind of failed proposals about the bridge holds hands and things like those. But the most interesting thing is that within this sort of matter, I'm going to share the screen for another 1 second. That we actually lined it up. we landed up making many interesting ways of seeing the bridge. So the book looked like this. So they were like the A chapter, as you see. So we could actually write all those chapters and wrote a poetic expression and understanding of it, which is a love affair between water and the bridge. And it is basically a broken love story, as how you actually see that the water will constantly move and the bridge will stay there. And the bridge will age and the water will refresh itself. And upstream and downstream and columns and fingers and hands, in a way that it had interesting metaphors to kind of open up. So the layout of the book looks like this. So it'll be available to buy, tinning, advertising. But at the same time, it also allowed us to kind of use different ways to, this is the chance where you can actually take a jump from your, away from the portfolio, because portfolio of yours can be a very heavyweight exercise to shift. So meaning that these are the chances, these are the subject matters where you take a chance and then you move into a new space and try to experience and fail. And I use fail a lot. So anyways, so these are some of the love stories which you want us to read, you said?
Sure, yeah.
Yes.
I'm so creepy.
Actually, since you said that the book is going to be on sale, what we can do is give us a link and then we can share it with the audience, so that if anybody is interested in buying any of these books, then you can just go directly to the link and we can share that with you at the end of the chat. Also, I'm going to take this opportunity to say that anyone who would like to ask any questions or share a comment, please feel free to send that in as well. You can just leave a comment at the bottom of your Zoom screen or send it to us on Instagram and Facebook, and we'll try to pick these up and put them into the conversation as well.
Okay, so, well, the link is not as yet ready. We are
Okay.
still developing it and cooking it slowly, but I think we'll be on our website, or we'll do something to kind of let everybody know, not in an advertising, but in a more humble way. So basically the chapters, it's all printed in my hand, but there are chapters which actually talks about the emotional quotient of the bridge and the water, and what do they talk. So one of the thing is that the title is, the chapter 4 was 3, which is the bridge holds hands. The bridge loves holding hands. It holds hands with the water. It holds hands with the people. It holds hands with the birds. It holds hands with the clouds. It holds hands with the fish, with the sky. But every time he realizes that the hand he is holding is not forever. The water will flow, the people will pass, the birds will fly, the clouds will drift, the fish will swim, the sky will change its colors. Touching is like passing electricity. Second, the bridge bridges you and me. The bridge holds anxiety. When you stopped and looked away to the far end, you said it. This is it. I felt anxious. Something wasn't right. It's incomplete. I became self aware. That moment is still fresh as I walk over the bridge. Every time, everything comes back to me. The bridge, I'm the bridge. Hear me, making sense of the fragments. The last one, I won't bore, the last one.
No, these are beautiful.
The bridge is a bridge between the impossible. Two parallels never meet, like two time zones, two ages, two souls, two bodies, two minds, two selves. It needs something more, something that it fits in between, fits in seamlessly, like it was made for making impossible possible. Close the door, open the windows. Yeah, so we can go on, but it's fine. I'm kind of a little shy to read out these things. They were done in some kind of a time zone.
We were
Yeah.
talking about you doing a book reading. We should definitely organize that soon.
No, actually, no. So the interesting part is that the books now are getting translated in Punjabi. So because we have lots to do with uh, to kind of engage with our audiences in Punjab and kind of we both met in Chandigarh and Jiten comes from Punjab. So mostly like there is a lot to do with the kind of serving to that kind of an audiences as well.
So we did a show in Chandigarh in Punjab Lyrical Academy. So then this book was published actually in English.
Hmm.
It's a story of a girl, fictional girl we made. She wanted to migrate. She wanted to leave India and go to America. So the story was based on her. We worked with one of our very good friend Talvinder, so who helped us to finish the story and who helped us to write the story. Uh, After that, then after the exhibition in Chandigarh, they said this meant to be in Punjabi as a local language because it was taught earlier in the local language and for that particular audience. So we said, okay. So then they helped us to translate the whole book into Punjabi, and the whole book is published. This is the first copy I'm showing you actually in Punjabi. This is
Oh, lovely.
so it's not released yet, but I can read a 1-3 lines for you. But
Please do.
if you want. So there's a story of a girl who want to go to meet her husband. She want to go to America. So she's so desperate. So she's trying all different ways. She tried to post herself into the post box. Then she could not go through it. Then she tried to somebody come from America and then and we came in a big hot air balloon. So you see most of our paintings in last we did in a couple of years as hot air balloons.
Yeah.
The desire to fly that come from there, from this story actually. This was an open script for people, so people can use it in any way. So we didn't copyright this script, so anybody can use it or make work out of it. That was our idea when we started this project. So I'm just reading a 3 lines out of this project of the story. So where I'm going to read very slowly because I'm not a very good reader I can speak very fluent Punjabi, but I cannot read fluently. So
that'll help all of us who don't understand it very well.
it's about the hot air balloon, basically. It's talking about that. So ਲਿਸ਼ਕਦੇ ਗੁਬਾਰਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਇੱਕ ਗੱਲ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦਿਸਣ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਸੁਣਨ ਲੱਗ ਪੈਂਦੇ ਨੇ means you can hear them first before you can see in the sky. ਗੁਬਾਰੇ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਲੱਗੇ ਖੋਖਲੇ ਬਲਬ ਨੂੰ ਭਰਨ ਲਈ ਉਹਦੇ ਚੂਲੇ ਦੀ ਚਿਮਨੀਆਂ ਲਾਟਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਕਮਾਲ ਦੀ ਗੜਗੜਾਜ ਪੈਦਾ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ ਅੱਗ ਦੀ ਉਹ ਲੌ ਸਵੇਰ ਦੇ ਹਨੇਰੇ ਨੂੰ ਮੱਠਾ ਮੱਠਾ ਸੋਨੇ ਦੇ ਰੰਗ ਵਿੱਚ ਰੰਗ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ ਖੈਰ ਮਨਜੋਤ ਕੋਲ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੇ ਸ਼ਾਇਰਾਨਾ ਅਹਿਸਾਸ ਮਾਨਣ ਦਾ ਸਮਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ ਉਸਨੇ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਪਹੁੰਚਣਾ ਸੀ 204 ਬਲੀਕਰ ਸਟਰੀਟ ਨਿਊਯਾਰਕ ਸ਼ਹਿਰ She's talking about her address where she has to reach.
To Bleecker Street in New York, yeah. So is this part of the holiday, what were you calling it? Holiday marriage?
Holiday vibes.
Holiday wives, yes.
Yeah. So the larger understanding of it is basically talking about a story which has been deep-rooted and the different subject matters, but different people, different protagonists, but subject matter is very same. Like it is kind of talking about this basic understanding of escaping and moving away. So there are little areas where we dwell in. So Holiday Wives walks into one of those little paragraph with little exercise, which was then expanded to a larger exhibition space. Also, the book is done in a very raw, sketchy way. And the first time when we actually posted one of the books to one of the people, he sent us back that you've send me the real copy of yours. So send me the one which is empty, which was interesting as a test that things are really working in that sense. Yeah, so basically the book actually illustrates all the little areas of our drawings and which can be then made into larger paintings. So these are the working drawings of those things. So when we actually say the artist books can actually do a lot with terms of the practice making, process oriented, and also the fragility of it rather than the final object. So these kind of interesting formats allow us to get there very quickly.
So this book has all the shows we have done in past around this subject matter on migration. Project called Escape, but there's no artist statement. So you have to read the story to understand the most of the works where we're coming from. So that was our idea, not to have a tutorial note or any speaker's interview or any essay. There's no essay in the book. You just see after the story, go through all the images of the shows we have done in the past.
So tell me, I mean, there is a very, in most of your works, right? I mean, you do works which are across genres, across material, whether it's publication or product or canvases, but there seems to be this underlying interest in the Indian middle class, which kind of comes through in a lot of your work. What is this fascination with the Indian middle class? Is this something that is informed, because of your personal histories or your personal experiences? But where does this come from and why?
I think it is to do with our growing up exercise. It is a family history to begin with. And then also to kind of looking into why certain ways are seen in certain understanding is seen. I think it is to kind of question that primarily. But also like most of the projects which we've been actually building is now when it is more of collaborating sort of an exercise that in a family situation you kind of landed up collaborating in lots of things. Like it can be a very simple thing about making some kind of event at home, and it has been actually developed with everybody's kind of too many cooks actually, but any which way that it allows us to kind of create a family understanding. From that, one of the things which actually comes on when you actually ask is sitting together and eating or sitting together and playing. So that is one of the connections which we've been actually understood, that when we actually working together, there is this kind of a new sense of there is this kind of a energy which can be developed, and that is also been seen in terms of when we actually develop into a format of a game, like where 9 people as a family play for an hour and a half and not knowing each other, but they kind of land up becoming very interesting friends. And that's something really interesting for us. I mean, I think one of the reasons of being making constantly acting as a game designer or acting as a catalyst to kind of develop a platform is this viewing of this kind of put together community understanding. It can also be an immersive exercise, or it can be a performance piece, which were open format mostly. That when basically it is a derivative from Oscar and Sophia Hansen's legendary open form, where the concept of no artistic expression is complete until and unless it is appropriated by its users. Meaning that can we actually then see a game be seen as a sculpture piece or a performative piece? We coming back to the same cycle actually, like looking into a community, looking into a cluster of people doing a certain kind of an act can be seen as presented as a performance piece or can be seen as a sculpture piece in that sense. So looking into the game design, actually, yes, when you actually say that, what is that family inclination to kind of develop? So I lost the track, but yeah, one of the things which we actually also saw in Lullaments when we were actually doing the table tennis balls was this exercise of when people can walk around it and also sometimes in it. The sense of nostalgia actually hits in when you're actually witnessing that act of push and pull and hovering sound, and using again the same idea of like table tennis to begin with, that you're a ball and you're a speck in the society, and you've been actually bounced towards both the sides, which is a side of negative and positive, which is the 2 players, and crossing over the threshold of the net, and your life actually is a game match in that sense that the moment it is off, the moment the game is over, your life does not have any relevance anymore. So one of the things which should we share the video of it once?
Sure.
Yeah, of course.
So this was in Germany.
And another iteration after this is the third iteration. So yeah.
He's cheating there.
Yeah, so in all the different iterations, actually, the subject, on viewing this, there is a sense of anxiety and a comforting at the same time. We call it lullaments, and we call it lullaments, which is basically a lullaby, and lament, which is to do with a birth and death. And the two negative and positive forces can be actually seen as two different players throwing, responding to each other. And at the same time, the effect which we actually landed up seeing was for some, it looked like a walk at the beach and listening to the sea. And for some, it was more of like a meditative understanding of a day or whatever, that moment where you're actually looking at yourself as an anomaly, but also at the same time you think you recognize yourself as a particular ball, but then you actually get into this larger group of things and you lose yourself. Yeah, so that's you want to say something.
Well, I think with Lullaments, and I'll just add over here, because for me, I was very personally sort of interacting with this particular installation when we did it at Stir. And what was fascinating was that it wasn't only about the final piece, right? But I saw the whole thing kind of build up, and then working through it, seeing people interact with it. And I had the opportunity of interacting with it on multiple levels and multiple times, just walking through that hall at least 5 times a day. And Viren and I, when we were discussing this last time, saying it was extremely meditative. And I think what was really interesting, and also hearing people's feedback, multiple people who interpreted it differently. But for me, it was it was a fascinating concept of being a spectator and then becoming a part of the spectacle, and then again turning back into the spectator and then becoming a part of it. So while for me it was like you'd go there and I'd see it and I'm looking at it from a distance and I'm watching it, but then eventually it kind of takes over you and you get immersed in it and you become one of those millions of orange tennis balls that are going back and forth. But if you if you stay on for a little longer, you kind of cross the next threshold, and then again you get distant from it and you become the spectator again. And so there was this this duality that was a constant dialogue between the work, between yourself, you being a part of the work, and then getting pulled away, which is something that I really enjoyed. And I think that's something that I see a lot in a lot of your works, this idea of the two, the idea of a dichotomy or a duality. Of course, besides the fact that you're Thukral and Tagra, that's one thing. But there's a lot of there seems to be multiple notions that are sitting on opposing ends that you feel the need to put in dialogue, and you feel the need to have interact with each other, whether it is whether it's the wrestler and the farmer, whether it is over here, whether it's the bridge and the water, or in this case, the spectator and the spectacle, or Nafrat and Parva, right? They're these like two very, very strong notions that come in contact with each other and come in dialogue with each other. So is this something that is intentional? Is this something that you feel the need to work with? Or is it just that it comes in conversation and it happens?
Well, we never actually strategize this duality or kind of this thing, but which is actually a coexisting in everything which we actually see. The positive will have a negative effect of it, and the way you, it all depends on which vantage point you're standing at. But looking into, I think the very near answer here is two people working on something which can have an opposition and which can have this kind of extreme understanding of two different things, which probably, as I said, can be a third person for self, uh, which is actually like, wings are lighter, but they are not flying up, or they are flying up within marble. They are picture, not a real one. The wings. There is another thing which we want to share was this. Can you?
We could see your screen.
Yeah. So the two wings, which are basically larger than a like imagining, like a person can actually see or think, because he just stands in between of it and then kind of lives the dream for a minute, for a picture, for a selfie, for a post or whatever. That particular lived moment is basically an illustration of something which has been longing, which he has been longing since ages. So we try to kind of create a sculpture piece which is has basically an arrested image of a dream, but also is lived by both of us to begin with, since it took like 2 years to kind of develop this large piece, and also has a mark, as a prompt, as an instructional to stand in between and complete the sculpture. So how a sculpture piece, which is now this particular work for us, actually opens up new ways to see it, in a way that a person is living for a moment in between the sculpture piece, views the wings, which is basically our wings and kind of like a large dream of humankind, and kind of gets a picture clicked. So that's the completion of the sculpture piece, that a person comes in between. Right now what you see is incomplete. So how do you actually open up these new ways if you don't really push ways of seeing? And the interaction is that when the artwork is not supposed to be touched by like a person, we actually created something which we wanted to be touched by everybody.
So tell me, are the two of you very different, or are you alike?
Very different.
How so?
I don't know. It's very hard to know this. Yeah, we've been agreeing. I mean, we've been agreeing to most of the things which we don't really have time to fight anymore. So initially it was more of like, why not this and why not that? But now it is mostly like using these things as a vehicle and as a final destination to reach, or maybe just a stopover to be there.
I think, you know how people say that opposites attract, but actually psychology says that when you have two people who are very similar to each other, it's a more productive and successful partnership. Now, in most duos or in most pairs, it's important, or they're successful partnerships when you very distinctly and clearly demarcate roles and responsibilities, right? I wanted to understand, you guys have been working together for so long now, and you have a very, very successful practice together and a partnership. Have you guys demarcated your roles and responsibilities? Because I know that, and I've seen you guys work on a singular canvas at the same time, which is absolutely astounding that you both can start from two different ends. What happens when you come to the point where your two brushes meet, or when the two of you, meet that culminating point in the middle? What happens then? Is it fireworks, or is it just like, okay, you do what you have to do and I'll do what I have to do? But how does this work? What are the dynamics?
Second. No, so it is mostly like, I mean, in terms of like, how do you work with the team anymore? Like, to begin with, we kind of resolve our ideas onto a sketch to begin with. So it is very well understood by now that how it is going to be seen as, rather than kind of meeting from two, we actually build up layers and layers. So that's how the entire basic understanding of it is. Not literally, like, how do you actually create a created a house by adding on bricks to it. So rather than saying that a person who did what and who did what, eventually it is a sweat and labor of many different people to kind of develop this. So we have our ways of seeing, and we've developed our own ways to kind of operate into. But yes, to begin with, this question actually happened way back when we started probably the first or the second painting, that we actually like met at a point where we were like, okay, this is something. So what we did was we battled it out that we had a quick to execute things. So it was very early on, but then I think after then we never thought about it. It seamlessly work around, and we both kind of divide our own ways to see. We never have a tagging of what we'll do.
So that's when you're translating things into an actual piece of art. But even when you're working, even when you're kind of just functioning as a practice, or as people who are working so closely together, are there a lot of clashes, or is everything very seamless? Because your art is very seamless, but there has to be some sort of tension as well, right, in the background. What is that like? Where does that stem from? Everything can't be so happy-go-lucky. Come on.
No, it is not happy-go-lucky. That's what I'm trying to say. There are lots of, I mean, we don't really have time to argue and fight anymore, but then there are little areas of differences, and then areas of like who will fix something quickly so the other person will join. I think it is not to negate the practice or negate the values by somebody who's actually thinking a lot about it, but rather than joining it and kind of improvising those things.
So there is a positivity towards one when you work together. So the reason behind it, suppose one of us has an idea. So we say, why don't we play this? Why don't we make this?
Come a little closer to the mic.
So when you say, I want to make this, so one of person has ideas. So say, I want to make this. Say, okay. So instead of negating it, so we say, okay, why can't we do it this way, and why can't we take it more forward? So instead of saying, if you're singular one person, then you keep thinking, okay, should we do this? I'm right or wrong. Most of the art is stuck in that. So for us, it is a very good. So we both discuss together and we take it forward. So it's a constant going on.
We don't really pay attention to this, actually. Honestly, tell you,
That's great that you can actually move beyond it.
Yeah, we don't see this thing as, and in terms of like lots of people have been telling that who came up with this idea. So we were like, the time owns the idea, not us. We're just using to kind of develop it, or we see as tools to develop that thing.
You also obviously you feed off of each other's not just ideas but energies as well, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, in a way that there are lots of mood swings, and how does the other person kind of handles it? So it's mostly like, positive and negative.
And how much of a role does the space that you're occupying, how much of a role does that play? Like, do you feel that you're energized by certain spaces and not by others? Like, what is that? What kind of environment do you need to create for yourself? You have two different studios. You do two different kinds of works in both the spaces.
Good music, no Bollywood music.
So, I mean, in a way that it has to be a driving. I mean, it has to be, the work has to, the process has to be really exciting. If the process is not exciting, the outcome cannot be exciting.
I have to share some very good, not news, a very interesting part. In this COVID times, he never used to play the Bollywood music. He started now. So which is
just to irritate him, actually. Irritate him to kind of like open up that kind of an area where we never. So
also very 5 o'clock, we have time for that now.
So you've set a time at 5 o'clock. Okay, now Sumir is allowed to play Bollywood.
No, he plays. Then we do Jugalbandi. So I play from my system, he plays from my system. And we both like clashing. And everybody comes and they're like, what's happening here?
Sort of like annoying each other by playing as much as thrashy music you can actually do. But in that course, we discovered many interesting lost soundtracks. So that's good.
So how did you guys meet?
We met in Chandigarh College of Art, and I was applying, this is way back in 98, 97. And I was applying for my undergrad in Chandigarh. He was already in the second year, and he kind of like dragged me at that moment, pretending to be a fresh applicant. And at that moment, it was The world was better, and it was.
The world was better without you weren't listening to Bollywood at that point.
I never got hooked to it actually.
And then you guys also, it's not like you met and then you started just working together. You guys had your own sort of journeys, you did different things, and then you came back and started.
What we did, we met in '97. And he joined in Delhi College of Art. Then I came to Delhi for my masters. So then he recognized me. So you were the same person who ragged. I don't remember.
You ragged so many people, you can't keep track of them.
Oh, in Chandigarh is very famous for ragging, by the way. I mean, I don't know if you're aware.
Social interaction.
Yeah. Now it's called social interaction. Now ragging is completely banned. But
Yes, it is illegal now.
my time it was really, really, really bad, crazy. So, but that was a good, it was a very good interaction with the seniors because we learned so many things from our seniors. And I know it was a very, used to feel bad. And I was the only person that used to keep laughing. So it means I was the person who got more ragged in my whole batch. But it was fun. I mean, it was a lot of learning. So that was the learning, that part. Imagine if I have to say, I don't want the ragging to happen. So, but then we could never met, to be frank. So then, but I came to Delhi for my master's. So then he recognized me. Then we started sharing our work with each other. This is how it happens. And we said, and we had like different vision whenever he will come and share with me. And then whatever I have, I will share with him my college work. I said, I'm unable to do this. Can you help me to finish this? So then he will say, okay, why don't we like do this way? We start interacting with each other. So it started in 2000. We started making our book. It's a 1 inch by 1 inch book. So then he joined with me in Ogilvy as the one of the department called R&D David department. So he joined with me as a visualizer. But he worked there only for 14 days. That was a very, so why 14 days? Because, and he asked me, he said like, what is this happening? What are we doing? He said like, we are in a commercial world. Okay, you have to listen to client and you deliver it. That's it. You cannot, I mean, you've got very few people who can reach to that level, then everybody listen to you. It's better we should do our own work, whatever we can do. So then we started doing our own projects, small projects, like starting from the Matchbox project. We have a budget of only 5 rupees. How can you make an artwork with 5 rupees? That was our first project. We started making stickers on Matchbox, and whenever the party happening, we go there and drop those matchboxes. That was our first project. Then from 5 rupees, then we say, why don't we make our own? Imagine on that, there was no internet, there was no Instagram. So like, we say, how can you carry a portfolio in your pocket? When you go there, say, what do you do? That's my portfolio. You give it to them in a small 1-inch book. So we made our own portfolio we made a book which has 468 pages, and it is 1-inch by 1-inch from all the sides. And it has a story of David and Goliath and all the works, illustrations, drawing, whatever we have done together, and we put it together and put it in that book. So that was our first actually e-zine. So we want to launch an online magazine, which we launched on our own website called bosdk.com, and start working on that. That was the first project of ours. So it was a very, so that was a journey we started together. And the project we did called Visual Dialogue, when he was in Ahmedabad and I was in Delhi. So we were sharing, email was a very new thing for us. So then we were sharing works by email. So he will work on some image and send image back to me with the layers. I will work on the same image, send him back to him with my layers added on the same image.
This is like the first year of first 6 months of attachments in the email.
Yeah. So this is how the journey started. Then the book was published as a 1-inch by 1-inch book.
So it's interesting. It's kind of evolved over a period of time, right? I mean, and you can see that also the way that you started your journey together has paved the way for the way you guys continue to work today. So it's rather seamless by that logic, right?
I think also the adaptability to the mediums, that also happened, that we were at the cusp while we were learning, the new mediums were walking in. So, and that actually continues to grow as the app comes in, and then the new ways to Zoom talk, and then we can bring in more lectures over the screen. So interestingly, that it is not new, but it happened way back when the Industrial Revolution happened. So it happened when the internet began, and now again it is actually moving into a very fast pace where the AI and singularity is given to us. You see.
Yeah. I also wanted to bring in over here is that looking at your brand, looking at Thukral and Tagra, I mean, you've become this international brand, right, today of artists. But what's fascinating is that you're not just mere artists. You are doing a lot of things that are going beyond your sort of definition of being artists. You guys have engaged with the community. There is this sense of sort of giving back to where you're taking from. You have started various initiatives, and there seems to be this sort of sense of ethical or moral responsibility that seems to be compelling you. And I'm curious about that, with reference to some of your initiatives like the Farmers Project, or what you're doing, a lot of different things that you're doing in Punjab. So what is this sort of ethical responsibility that you guys feel compelled about?
I think the primary reason of being social engaged exercises being studying social design. So as we begin with this, our practice actually oscillate between the social design and the studio practice.
Hmm.
And social design actually allows us to build new formats and new games to open up, bring people in, and absorb new ways of kind of looking into its more porous structure. And studio practice actually is kind of looking inwards. So if you actually see the two ways of how it is growing, is an open format and a closed format. Closed format and an open format. Um, and So the social design actually began very early on with an HIV/AIDS awareness project, which we actually did. I took it as my NID final thesis project, and he could sign all the things because we wanted somebody uh, host it, and he could sponsor it. So, which we actually did our own project, which we went for 2-3 years to kind of understand, and then landed up seeing that as a methodology to approach into an art practice, using different ways. Now when we actually look into the farming exercise or looking into the ideas of migration, they both connect with our family histories, and looking outwards to begin with as the idea of migration. People have been traveling, and then collecting the stories from there, and then now coming as a homecoming, looking into the reason of why the idea of migration actually becomes so important in terms of the every city. When we actually have a mass exodus from one place to B, what is the reason of that? And then, so understanding that there are more policy failures, climate control, and many other sort of issues which have been a part of this process. So when we actually look into the farming project, we find ourselves really complicated, understood that what does it kind of really mean for us being studied almost all our life in a metropolitan now, and kind of like developing things in our studio. What does it really mean for us to kind of go back to a village and kind of encounter these problems and understand? I mean, honestly, to begin with, it sounds extremely touristy to begin, but honestly, we took raw a lot of time, and not in terms of the uh, understanding the purpose, but knowing people, understanding the stories to begin with. There are ways to kind of engage with them, and there are ways to kind of understand the knowledge, and this is how we actually developed. We got into the villages where there are suicide cases, and moving on to the family by family, we could understand what is the real problem in terms of it. The real problem on the news and the on the newspaper is definitely there. It is true, but there is another sense of uncertainty which is moving into all the families. Uh, and so as our action actually and the connection started building up, which actually took almost 2 years to kind of get into a comfort zone so that we can actually talk to people and engage with at that level of empathy, where a family has actually gone through a massive loss right in the house where you're actually sitting. So how do you actually engage with people? What do you actually supposed to say? And how do you actually get what you need to do. Like, what is the ways ahead? What is the solution? So I think the idea of social design also, it is like the design problem solving exercise. You find out new modalities, you try to connect with as much as you can, but also the our kind of like the final anchor of our practice, which is the kind of academic and the education, opened up many different ways to kind of answer something very similar, very simple. So we got connected with associations and organizations which have been teaching students and kind of supporting the families. So rather than working with them, made more sense rather than doing something on our own. Facilitating kitchens and things like those becomes very apparent. But I think the most thing is that when you're actually talking about extreme dire situations, you are actually trying to solve something which is very basic about certainty of food, that I will get the food tomorrow, my children can actually eat, and then next day they can actually go to the school. It has come to that level of basics. So, in one way, we are actually looking into the future, and the other way, we are actually trying to and struggling to resolve basic problem of fueling the system.
Hmm. And so where is this project at right now?
So there is this organization called the Badu Sahib. We've been actually working with them for the last 7 years, not knowingly that we will reach up to this kind of a collaboration eventually. So, and they've been very generous to us, and we've been trying to kind of help them out from really long time, developing new modalities and kind of providing them new ways of ideas, keeping them up to the time of the change. Like when the internet came in, we kind of planned at that same time to kind of develop new system of education, new app building exercises. We provide this kind of a free understanding to these things most of the time. It is mostly handled solely by Jiten. No, it is not handled by so much by me. But he's been actually, because I think I have a language barrier in speaking in Punjabi, and I can listen to it, but I can't communicate so much. And also, like going and meeting to people in villages, he could actually access a bonding where I could actually be just a listener as a tourist. So, meaning that we actually have to change our ways and strategize that how do we need to deal with this particular problem.
Right.
Just to share one small story of this guy. There's a guy called Jiten who documented more than 2,000 deaths, single man, of all the farmers who did suicide. So it's very easy when we go and meet him. He tells us the thing and we start like observing it and start noting it. But we cannot take any pictures. We were so uncomfortable. We want to make him uncomfortable.
Right.
So he came to meet us in Delhi. But he was not talking to us at all.
It was so hard for us to even bring him to a point. And while we spent like 2 days with him, just switching on the phone and kind of like taking permission from him that whatever we this conversation is not going to be in a we're not going to commercialize this, but rather than use this as to canonize and understand these things, and maybe something will come out. Now we don't really have, it's not really in hands of two people or in a group of people. It's a very large problem, and we're just constantly looking into one area, one tiny area, which is because we have this accessibility, we understand the weather, we understand the food, we understand the sweat, what kind of a labor we, because we come from that region. But when it actually comes from him as stories, we were actually talking to him, and then he's constantly receiving phone calls of death. Like, there is another thing which has happened and I need to be there. So like, sorry, I cannot be there. I need to take a day off. So it's quite like arresting at that moment that you don't really know, while you're actually engaging with him, you're actually wasting his time because he was supposed to be somewhere there reporting a death.
Right.
So all the understanding of all the data are not from the government, but from the NGOs who are actually documenting from the crematoriums or these places where the dead body comes in.
So for them, the reporting on the same time is more important, because if they go late, then
there'll be no evidence of
paperwork. There's no evidence of it.
Right.
There's a private panchnama they do. So then they have their own documentation of that. So then because when the death happened, then all the panchayat come there and they sit there. So they tell everybody, see, now you please sign now immediately. This death happened because of this. Otherwise, chasing them the whole thing again, maybe another episode.
So how do these kind of interactions and this kind of work that you're doing away from your mainstream studio practice, I'm sure all of that also influences what you're doing in the studio, right?
So, one thing which it takes forever actually to understand these nuances. It does not, these stories does not actually happen quickly. But what happens is that these things allow you to think deeper. Uh, what is the meaning of creating a practice in this moment where you're actually reporting somebody's massive, mental loss or kind of physical loss, and how do you actually? So one thing which we realize that we need to delete ourselves from the frame. We need to exit from the frame, leaving the work as its own, to leave and to kind of open it up on its own and to kind of resonate with the people or the audiences. We cannot be standing in the frame anymore. So the new understanding is to kind of like exit from the stage. This is, I don't know how well it works, but being very candid and honest, as you said, that the entire approach has to come out, the intent should come out. So this is one of those things.
It's interesting, talking to you as artists, because when we come from the realm of architecture, it's a very different sort of perspective where the journey, it starts off with narratives and with stories, but it's not a process of storytelling necessarily. It ends at an object, it ends at the structure and the architecture that is built. Um, Whereas with art, I think the narrative is allowed to take center stage, right? And that happens with a lot of your work. You have very deep seated narratives, excuse me, in your work. So I'd be interested in knowing a little bit more about how you deal with that. Like, why is it important for you to illustrate your narrative and to bring that to the fore? Because I know that even a lot of architects, we might have that story in the background, but it's never what is necessarily illustrated or is not necessarily presented beyond the initial sort of conversations that you have with clients and things like that. But here you're able to do that through your work.
I don't really have a proper answer to your, not really a question, but kind of more as,
Yeah, just a comment.
yeah. See, honestly, to tell you, like there has been times where you actually take a little forefront to kind of push these things, especially when it comes to the issue with farming. We actually thought that there are two things which we have to be aligned and kind of like, deep down understanding when we actually look back, which is the idea of education and agriculture. And these two things becomes the kind of in the forefront of the practice in that sense, like, at this particular moment. However, there are many ways to kind of, and through these lenses or through these little pockets, we try to kind of introspect our own egos, basically. So how do we actually keep ourselves away, or how do we actually not create our self-obsessed portraits again and again, but rather using these moment and kind of using this opportunities to create uh, a more doorways or more portals to kind of open up new engagements. So there are, I think one of the reasons is one of the things which actually opens up are the making of games. Something which actually I don't want to kind of miss out to in when it comes to like using this as a strategy building. When you actually talk about the kind of a different mediums and ways, one of the ways is definitely talking about the like, can you see a game as an architecture, or can you see an architecture as a game?
As a game.
So, just a prompt to begin with, but interesting ways to look is that the visitor can access the spaces in their own hunch, and guided by the signages and design, it will actually allow him to move in. Now, the game allows you to kind of disconnect from the reality, and so does an architectural building will do. But what are the open forms of an architecture? Can be a football ground where you're actually moving into a football, which as a participant, when you're playing, you're completing the work. So I'm just trying to kind of build up a parallel to two different mediums, and which has a strong form, and which has no form in that sense. I mean, in a way that the belief of football is a form then, which we are subscribed to. Now, looking into one of the buildings which we exhibited, which was very challenging, was the Maxi Museum by Zahadi. Now, how do you actually create a sculpture how do you exhibit a sculpture within a sculpture piece?
Yeah.
Because all the forms, so, I'm just looking at that as a prompt to kind of open up ways of seeing that how do we kind of navigate within a constrained form on its own. So now, and also looking into that the form was a constraint, now there is no form to it, but and also like what is the institution on a virtual platform looks like, and what is the form of it? What is a brick and mortar to be understood as? Is it more as a rhizome understanding, or it is more as a hierarchy system?
So that actually brings me to the idea of when artists create art, who are they creating it for? So, for example, when you are asked to, or when you're invited to exhibit at the Maxi, right? Are you responding to the physical environment and the built environment that you're exhibiting within? Or, for example, when you showed at the sculpture park at Nahargarh Fort, right? You had a certain series of objects that you were presenting over there. Or when you were at the Yorkshire Park, the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, you had a different sort of take there. So, but as artists, are you creating art independent of the audience? Are you creating for an audience? Are you creating for a gallery or the space where you're exhibiting? Are you creating for the gallerist? Again, as architects, we seldom, I'm not saying never, but seldom get the opportunity to we seldom get an open canvas and unlimited budgets. There's always a brief that we're responding to, because you're creating architecture for somebody. But art doesn't necessarily have to conform to that, right? So, but as individuals, or as Thukral and Tagra, who do you create art for?
So the primary reason to begin with is to kind of resolve our own question. This question has many ways to see it. And one of the ways how we see it as a conversation piece between us, and the final conversation piece goes for people. So we do things for resolving, questioning, and as a prompt. Of course, we don't really work for, we definitely work for a space if we know that where it is going, that definitely changes the subject matter and the choice of subject matter, that since by now we have many different ways to kind of approach, and many different questions can be asked, and what kind of question and how it needs to be articulated, and what kind of a medium, scale, temperature, language. Recently, we did an exhibition in Kazakhstan, which was a mix and a flux between the languages. Like we need to actually make all the translations in English, in Kazakh, and then in Russian. So we created table tennis tables, and then the table tennis table itself became a point of conversation, that you meet with two different people and play the table and play the match. So it all depends, and particularly that was piece which was conceived for spaces. And since we have been doing, so we want to show one imagery because it is important now. So this is a wrestling ground between Yorkshire Sculpture Park's exhibition area, and then looking into the entire paintings, which actually flew off from the base of this thing. There is this kind of a gravitational pull towards the subject matter, where you will actually have to, like the kids who are actually doing this is a gameplay which they're actually doing, and there is a video of it, people can actually watch it. But the point is that there are actually 7 maneuvers of wrestling which they are actually trying to practice, or they're trying to experience or exhibit by holding it for 10 seconds. Now, once you hold on to these points, every point leads to a problem in the farming. And the central, as you grow in the center, the problems increase, the tendency of the problems they get more intense, and you land up holding it and reading it for that particular 10 seconds as a farmer is feeling from really long time. This was very much planned to kind of set into this sort of a scenario. One of the things that the exhibition got postponed, it from winters, from March, which was almost beginning of the summer. Now, from summers to it changed into a little winter. So we had an issue about the performance piece, because in winters you will actually be wearing more clothes. How do you actually engage in? So meaning that there are levels of thinking about the project matter. How do you actually bring the subject, peel like layer by layer, like a book, like the jacket, and then you will actually lot of illustration, and then finally the plates will actually walk in with the imagery, and so on, the bibliography. So the exhibition opened up like a book, and as a game board, like as a board game, you open the central piece, and then you start playing, and then you read the instructions on the left hand, and then you see the card game on the right, and then you somehow write the scores. Meaning that every exhibition then will actually become an exercise where you will actually imagine the kind of number or players you will actually access. So, and how intense and how much time do you actually build up to these? So these are extremely very well calculated, like you do it in architecture, every structure understanding of it. So it is very similar in terms of the mediums. So if you are doing it for kids, you have a different set of deck cards. Maybe there is a new language when you actually walk into a different state. So when we exhibited the same game design in Europe, we had a different card set. When we actually did this in America, we did something very different. When we did it in South America, we had different understanding of it towards Amazon. So we constantly like move around with the subject matter, looking into the space.
I'm actually glad that you brought this in, because I wanted to refer to this particular work and also ask you about why is sport so important in your work, whether it's, talking about wrestling, whether it's talking about table tennis. There are these hints that constantly keep coming back to different sporting sort of experiences. Where does that emerge from?
See, the game actually allows, it is a very interesting exercise about, if you think about the pivot is social design, if in that sense, like just placeholder of this thing. Can we see then the game becomes the ultimate inclusive understanding, which is not, politically not, but again, looking into the free understanding of playing a football in that sense, that anybody can actually play the football, but only some can actually take it as seriously in terms of like professionally or whatever.
Yeah.
So looking into the sports actually allows you to get into a scenario, and which we are interested in, the scenario part of it. Who builds a scenario? What is the scale of it? Can it be questioned? Can the forms be challenged? Can different ways of looking at can we mod certain games? Can we change them? Can we use them into a different ideological structure? Can we make social games in that sense, like looking into the idea of reward as an empathy, or looking at award as a career or as a care? How do you actually move away within the preconceived notions of sports as a closed format, but also to think about the ideas of the scenography of play. Since childhood, a person is equipped to kind of learn in a form of a playground. What does that kind of mean to kind of use into? I mean, to us, we never grow up. We humans don't really grow up. We are always children. We're wearing different clothes and having a beard on the face. Meaning that, I mean, we still actually look into the childhood to kind of looking into any kind of understanding, like it's deep down in the memory. What I meant is that when we actually look into sports, we look from two different vantage points. So I was a TT player to begin with, like I could play with both the hands. Because of an accident that I actually lost my right hand bone at a point, like I fractured it, and I started playing with the left hand, so I could actually play with both. On the other hand, Jiten's father owns an akhada, but he never actually entered the ground. He always could see from a distance as a visual. For both of us, akhada and table tennis became a very interesting introspective point to our own self introspective understanding about questioning about our own childhood. But looking into that walk inwards, we could actually open up many different ways to see the fissures or the social understanding or the kind of voids which we have built up. Why we are interested in sports, this was one of the reasons, but also sports like reading a book or watching a film or listening to a webinar like this can be extremely participatory. And it can be done in your own time. It can be done in different time zones. And it can be done with all different people. You don't really need technology in that. Whatever we create, we try to create as much as analog as possible, and also see that as an expansion of reading a book.
So in a way, it's definitely immersive. It becomes a tool to bring people into the work and interact with it, and it's also democratizing at some level, right?
Only in some level, because also then the language will walk in, the visual aesthetics will walk in. However, those things we are very cognizant about these things, that where the game plays will do it happen. Like right now, we have actually made the wrestling mat as an open ground where we can actually, the plan is to kind of take it into different villages and different spaces to kind of open up and allow people to play on it, and then we can roll back and then take it back.
So interestingly, you mentioned that, you obviously, like all of us, are influenced by our personal histories, our collective histories, our journeys. So now I understand why TT and why wrestling plays an important part in your narrative, right? And I've always wondered that it's a recurring motif. It's not something that kind of has come once and disappeared. It's something that keeps coming back to it in different forms. Did you know? We meet people along the way in our journey. We have different experiences. Tell us about some of the people that you have met, maybe together or independently, that you feel have influenced you in the way you think and in the way you do your work. Have there been any significant people?
I mean, there are
lots of
there
people.
are lots of
but,
people. There are lots of people.
Pinpoint. I mean, if you can give a ref. I mean, if you want to talk about.
No, we learn from friends. We learn from lots of people. So I think it is not. I mean, not really like a path-changing thing when we would like to kind of name, but yeah, I mean, on a generic understanding, yeah, there has been a lot of people who've been a part of the journey. Actually, a simple thing about a person who cooks is an important part in terms of like how he could actually allow us to do things at that moment. So looking into that larger understanding as well.
That's interesting that, you don't want to, because a lot of people, the minute you ask them a question like this, they will pick the one sort of influence that has stood apart from them. And I think that this is something that also is quite illustrative in your work, is that it's very, it's modest in its presentation. And I think that is something that I can, vouch for, and I can tell the audience very confidently. I mean, we spend a lot of time together. There seems to be a modesty not only in your demeanor and the way you hold yourselves and conduct yourselves, but even in the work that you present, even in the way that it is put together. And I think that's rather refreshing coming from, highly successful celebrity artists. So I'd like to.
Yeah, one of the interesting thing is, I think the parents definitely hold probably the number one sort of understanding to this thing. If one has to thank somebody or one has to kind of look into that, who, because of their hard work, we could actually do and study. But at the same time, even our friends in schools and faculties for the most important things, who could cultivate this sort of an understanding. And also, I think by this time when growing up, definitely you meet people who will help you out in certain sort of thing. But yeah, more or less, keeping these things in mind.
Yeah. And I have to ask, I mean, this is probably, you've probably been asked this many times, but what defines Thukral and Tagra? Do you have some sort of like I'm not getting into the style of the work, but as a duo, as two people who work together, as people who've kind of built their brand for themselves, what defines you?
I mean, I have been actually speaking in a very rude way about definition of an artistic practice, which actually, like the moment you know how to define it, is a death of the practice. One of the thing is that I want to use this as a river flow, or kind of have this ways of metaphorizing or kind of using certain analogies to develop the practice, which is kind of learning in that sense that we're going to learn every day to live and sustain and survive. Especially we've learned that we've grown up so much in within 4 months. Uh, looking into everyday sort of a thing. I think it is to do keeping yourself update with the fast changing time. So I think adaptability and agility.
Do you think that's also probably one of the biggest challenges today?
It is the challenge, but this is how one needs to see because you will be surrounded by emotions and anxiety and comfort at the same time. But you need to kind of sustain yourself, move on with your, and kind of absorb many things because you can't actually, we don't have so much of freedom to kind of express our failures. So to everybody, you see. So
It's interesting. You've actually used the word failure a number of times since the conversation started, right? And it's not something that a lot of people are very comfortable talking about. It's something that, especially in a public realm, people would rather highlight their successes and not talk about failures. This is a struggle that I've been facing with a lot of designers and architects, where I would tell them to, if I was writing about their work, I tell them to give me, initial drawings and sketches of their projects. And everyone's very shy of that because they say, no, you have all the pretty pictures of the final product. Use that, right? I don't want to talk about the process. I don't want to talk about what went wrong. But for me, I think what's important is to talk about the evolution of the process, to talk about where you started from and where you ended. And you could have traveled across the map in that time to reach where you finally ended. You could have also started with a vision and ended with the same vision, but the process of that could have been, traveling and turning 360 and coming back to it. So coming back to the idea of failure, what do you think, for the both of you, together or separately, what do you think have been some of these important failures that you feel that you've learned from? Or, maybe they're the ones that have formed certain benchmarks on your way.
Making works, the kind of works which we try to build up, that is extremely challenging to begin with for us. So to reach here, there has been lots of sleepless nights and lots of failures in that execution, meaning that we only need to not get scared, but use that as in our stride to kind of develop new modalities and new ways to encounter those things. One of the reasons, one of the things about uh, that I think one of the challenges, if somebody does the challenge, we actually try to kind of live it. It may take 5 years to kind of check that box, but it also allows us to kind of have a purpose. We get purposeless otherwise. Meaning that, we've actually made a massive sculpture piece, which was seen as a challenge to begin with. That can we actually create it or not or something. But once it was done, we were actually over with the larger scale of it. We were now thinking about the invisible understanding of it. And if we have to create a new work, maybe it is not going to be this big, but maybe extremely like as I was actually talking about the other day, which was from an Olympic size artwork to something which is a Chinese whisper, or like not a Chinese whisper, but just a whisper.
Well, actually, what you said, and I noted it down, is thinking of an Olympic scale work, but making a whisper as powerful to start a revolution.
Yeah.
And I thought that was very appropriately put together. But I'm going to kind of pursue on this. What about, do you have any personal failures that you feel have affected you over the years? I mean, we all have professional failures. Things work, things don't work, projects go topsy-turvy, and, we kind of experiment with things. But what about something that's been hard-hitting? Or, of course, if you're comfortable to talk about it.
There are uncomfortable stuff in between here. But yeah, not really exposing something which is very
No,
vulnerable.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
No, it's not. We don't care about the spots. We this as an opportunity to kind of introspect at the same time, looking into
The Tony thing.
No, there are many jokes where we don't supposed to say these things.
The cow one.
No. Not really, Mrinalini. Not really. We have something in terms of, but in a way that those are absorbed in the process. Those are, I mean, those things like you kind of fancy making something, there is an error in making, and then you kind of like change the narrative a little. So we tried doing many things which we couldn't. We again start with something very small and kind of learn from that perspective and then move into it.
I think it's been a tremendous journey for the two of you, and I was very tempted. I didn't do it. I wish I had, but I was very tempted. Yesterday, I was looking up some of your work online, and I saw so many photographs of the two of you and how you've just changed over the years and how you've evolved over the years. And I was very tempted to actually make a collection of them and say, just look at you guys from where to where you've come. But I think I couldn't have, I mean, you guys have just defined yourselves and you've defined a space for yourselves. And it's a moment of pride for us to be able to, in a way, be represented through you. And I think it's been a fascinating time, just knowing a little bit more about you. I do want to ask, do you feel that there is a specific sort of, I mean, we talked about a style and we talked about an identity, we talked about a definition, but if you had to sum up Thukral and Tagra in a sentence, what would that be?
Oh, why? No,
Maybe a book.
I love pink.
Sorry?
Then has interesting ways to interpret these things.
You come up with the most fascinating titles for your books. Think of something.
Take time.
Okay.
Yeah.
You take your time. What I can do till then is we've got some very interesting comments and questions that have come in from the various platforms and people who are listening in. Let me just read out some of those for you. We've got Tanvi Karya, who's joined us from Ahmedabad and wanted to know about Bread Circus and TBT, and I think we've addressed that, Tanvi. On Facebook, we've got Akshay Kaul who's saying, love this. Nandita Basak saying, lovely. And Amit Mehra saying, what a lovely idea of doing an art book like this. So there are a lot of people who are really enjoying your work. And please keep an eye out on Thukral and Tagra's website for details of when the book is going to be available, and you can buy it there. This is not product placement, but this is genuine. We have Gayatri who says, very impressed to hear about your social outreach to those not as fortunate and contributing to strengthening them in a holistic way. We've got a lot of comments, not many questions. Okay, I have someone who says, your space division, Saurav Haldar, if you're here on Zoom still, maybe you can unmute yourself and ask your question because it's a little confusing. Saurav, are you here? Okay, so he says your space division, collage designing and gradients are awesome. From which perspective do you compose elements like scattered and glitched? It feels like a huge void and less gravitational field and feels like a floating ecosystem.
So, I mean, I think it is more to do with the compositional strategy. I think the vocabulary which we try to kind of build up is a free flow exercise that the imagery and the heart does not settle. So it kind of moves. So there are very few pieces where there is a gravitational understanding to the imagery. Otherwise, it is a frame between animation. So that's the kind of a compositional strategy which we see in our own body of work. I mean, not as a strategy which we actually subscribe to, but it just happened to be enjoying that.
Okay. And what else are we expecting from you now, next?
So the pollinator exercises are happening. I think that is really interesting. That keeps us really occupying within the team space that we just become a team member then, and we don't normally, we exit the frame and become a member. And that's really like a good advantage to kind of open up this kind of an exercise. That's one. The books are coming, the second thing, and then more exhibitions once in physical spaces once these things are over.
We're making board games also, so people can buy on our website.
Yeah.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
fact, apparently, given the lockdown, the sale of board games has gone up tremendously because people are now finally going back to not just playing on their iPads and doing Sudoku and everything, but actually, I guess, when you're stuck in a house with people and with family, and people are trying to kind of go back to their older um, options. So a lot of Ludo and Scrabble and all of that is coming back.
So yeah, we've been working on many interesting things. One of the games is about a walk with Guru Nanak, which can be played in a Gurdwara, which is already 7 to 8,000 people have already played in Delhi. So
Really?
yeah, and there is a link on the website. We can actually throw that link. But
So another game called the Walk of Life, which has two versions. One is environment, which went to only 5 museums and is in part of curriculum in Germany.
in
Okay.
one of the universities in Germany. And then using the game design elements, we can actually we've been making, so there are like 7 to 8 games which comes in a board game, and there are many objects which can be associated with it. We've been now working on a game called 2030, where is a climate change exercise. So that is something which we've been actually brewing in the studio now and then, and we'll be actively working on it. So within a month's time. So.
It's wonderful. Viren, I believe you have something to share.
Yes, of course. I mean, first of all, thank you so much. It's completely overwhelming the way you present your work. And I must say, you have both of you, a certain lightness about narrating your journey, which is, of course, very intense. And what I feel very strongly from a personalized experiences, you are able to transcend into a larger audience and a audience which is not even limited to India, but an audience that is a global audience. And I feel that is remarkable for an artist. And I think that's when art is created, in my opinion, that you are able to connect from your personal experience across. And a few days back, you said something very beautiful. I can't forget that. I had to make a note of that. Thinking can have cosmic proportions. And I find that very powerful, and I find so apt for your work. And you may not know it. I was invited many years back as a jury to an architectural college in Mumbai, and discovered there a lot of work that architects did, young architects in their final years. That's 5 years, of course, and they had depicted your style, your of narrating. I thought, my God, I'm so familiar with this work. Where does this come from? So you can see already the impact is not only at the level of illustration, but I think the impact that you create uh, is also of enriching individuals who are hungry for stories. You are infusing in them gradually and expanding their world with more and more stories, meaningful stories. Actually, from your experience, you are creating a connect to people and stimulating them to generate their stories. And I find that connect really amazing and touching in your work. So thank you so much for creating that.
That's very kind of you, Virendra.
And by the way, meanwhile, I spoke to a client, so we have to go and visit a site together. Seriously, I'm not joking. She's only scared that you're very expensive.
We won't say these things in public.
I'm not saying the figure, but well, I'm saying I
We'll work on the free whisper game.
don't worry. Let her not listen to this. Thank you so much, really.
Thank you so
Great,
much. Thank you so much
great.
for having us.
Sumir and Jiten, I have to say it's been absolutely fabulous having this chat with you guys. It's been a while since we caught up, and I was very excited to do this afternoon. And it's been a whole different sort of league of conversations. And I do hope that, and I'm sure with the kind of comments that we've been getting, it's been inspiring. It's been very honest and candid, and I'm grateful for that. And I really hope that we can take these conversations further. I think it's important. And like I said earlier, it's not only about, we kind of tend to work in our own little silos, and it's important to have these cross-disciplinary conversations. So while Viren is setting example, I do hope others will follow suit and will get in touch with you guys to do a lot of collaborative work together. And I
Yes.
know that, and especially with the kind of work that you guys are doing, it's not a linear sort of progression, and you're so open-minded and so progressive in the way that you approach things, that I feel anybody can do anything with you. And just to kind of put out there, for example, that you guys have been working with Rado to create watches and timepieces, right? So right from there to doing sculptures, to doing fashion, to I had the privilege of having dinner in this beautifully laid out room with you guys at one point. So various things. And I think that's what's beautiful, is to be able to open up these opportunities for all of us, and to explore that. And I can't wait to come back to your studio as soon as things are more settled, and see what all can be done. But thank you so much for taking out your time and for having this conversation with us, and for being a part of the Unplugged Talks. I would like to thank everyone on Zoom, on Instagram, on Facebook for participating. All of these talks are recorded and are archived on YouTube. So please feel free to share that and to revisit the conversation as and when you'd like. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank our team, especially Siddhant and Ankit, without whom none of this would be possible. They are the ones who work behind the scenes and make everything happen. But once again, on behalf of Matra, Viren, and myself, Sumir and Jiten, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Lots more conversation to be had.
Yes. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.